The horizon's edge drifted through the outer veil like a small fish in an endless ocean. Captain Lee Taman sat in his command chair, watching the stars pass by on the main screen. His ship was not fancy or new. It was a research vessel, old and reliable, doing the work that most other ships in the Galactic Coalition considered boring. Taman liked boring. Boring meant safe. Boring meant his crew came home alive. "Captain, we have something strange on the sensors," Lieutenant Choi Yuna said from her station. She was young, maybe 28, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "There's an object in the asteroid field ahead. It's big, really big." Taman stood up and walked over to her station. The sensor display showed a massive shape hidden among the floating rocks. The computer could not identify what it was made of. That was unusual. Coalition sensors could identify almost any known material in the galaxy. "How big?" Taman asked. "At least 50 kilometers long, sir. Maybe more. The asteroids are blocking the full scan." Dr. Park Ji-won rushed onto the bridge before Taman could respond. She was the ship's chief scientist, a woman in her early 30s who loved old mysteries more than anything else. Her black hair was messy and she looked like she had not slept in days. "Tell me you see it too," Ji-won said, staring at the screen. "Tell me I'm not imagining this." "We see it," Taman confirmed, "but we don't know what it is yet." "It's a precursor ship," Ji-won said with absolute certainty. "It has to be. Look at those readings. No known species builds with materials like that." Taman had heard stories about the precursors his whole life. They were supposed to be an ancient civilization that existed billions of years ago, long before any of the current galactic species. Most people thought they were just legends. Fairy tales that old species told to feel less important. "Precursors are mythology," Engineer Ko Minho said as he entered the bridge. He was a practical man who believed in things he could touch and fix. "There's no proof they ever existed." "Then explain that." Ji-won pointed at the screen. Minho studied the readings and frowned. He could not explain it. That bothered him. "We need to get closer," Ji-won said. "We need to investigate." Taman considered the request. They were far from Coalition space, weeks away from any backup. If something went wrong, they would be on their own. But that object on the sensors was unlike anything he had ever seen. If it really was a precursor ship, this could be the most important discovery in galactic history. "Take us in, Lieutenant Yuna," Taman ordered. Slow and careful. The horizon's edge moved through the asteroid field like a needle threading through cloth. Yuna's hands moved across her controls with steady precision. She had flown through worse. The asteroids here were spread out, easy to avoid. As they got closer, the object became clearer. It was a ship. There was no doubt about that now. But it was like no ship Taman had ever seen. The hull seemed to be made of crystal and metal mixed together. The shape was wrong, with curves that did not follow any engineering principles he knew. Parts of it seemed to shift when he looked away and then back again. "I'm trying to scan it," Minho said from the engineering station, "but our instruments keep failing. It's like the ship is rejecting our sensors." "Is it active?" Taman asked. "Any power signatures?" "Nothing. No heat, no energy, no signs of life. It's completely dead." But something about the ship did not feel dead to Taman. It felt like it was waiting. "I want to send a probe," Ji-won said. "Just to touch the hull, get a sample." Taman nodded. They launched a small probe that flew across the empty space and touched the crystal surface of the ancient ship. The moment it made contact, all its systems shut down. The probe went dark and drifted away. Useless. "That's not normal," Minho said quietly. They tried 3 more probes. All of them shut down the instant they touched the ship. "We need to go over there," Ji-won said. "In person. The ship is protecting itself from automated systems. But maybe it will respond to living beings." "That's dangerous," Minho argued. "We have no idea what that thing is or what it might do." "That's why we need to find out," Ji-won countered. Taman made his decision. "We'll take a shuttle. Small team. Ji-won, Minho, Yuna, and myself. If anything happens, the rest of the crew will take the horizon's edge back to Coalition space and report what we found." 2 hours later, the 4 of them sat in a small shuttle, flying toward the ancient ship. Taman wore his standard EVA suit, sealed and pressurized. His heart beat faster than he wanted to admit. This felt important. This felt like standing on the edge of something that would change everything. The shuttle landed on what looked like a flat section of the hull. Or at least it had been flat when they approached. Now that they were close, the surface seemed to ripple and shift. "The hull is moving," Yuna said, her voice tight with nervousness. "It's opening," G1 whispered. An entrance appeared where none had existed before. The crystal and metal pulled back like a living thing, creating a passage into darkness. "Well," Minho said, "that's either a very good sign or a very bad one." They stepped out of the shuttle and walked toward the entrance. Taman went first, his hand on the weapon at his hip, even though he suspected it would be useless here. They entered the passage and lights began to glow around them. Not electric lights, but a soft bioluminescent glow that came from the walls themselves. The corridor was enormous. It stretched ahead of them for what looked like kilometers. The walls were smooth and covered with patterns that might have been writing or decoration. The ceiling was so high that it disappeared into shadow above them. "The gravity feels normal," Minho noted, checking his suit readings. "Earth normal, actually." "How does that make sense?" It did not make sense. None of this made sense. They walked deeper into the ship, their footsteps making no sound on the smooth floor. The passage branched into other corridors, creating a maze. Taman marked their path carefully. He did not want to get lost in this place. Then Jiwon stopped walking. She stood in the middle of the corridor and looked around at the vast empty space. Something about the silence felt heavy, like the ship was listening. She did not plan what happened next. It just came out naturally. A human response to standing in a place that felt alive. "Hello?" She called out into the darkness. For a moment, nothing happened. Then everything happened at once. The lights brightened, flooding the corridor with golden illumination. A deep sound resonated through the structure. Not a mechanical hum, but something that felt alive and aware. The patterns on the walls began to move and shift, and then a voice spoke. It did not come from any speaker. It came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating in the air around them and maybe even inside their minds. The voice sounded old, so impossibly old, like the echo of something that had been waiting forever. Recognized. Human. Species classification. Compatible. "Welcome, inheritors." The four of them stood frozen, staring at each other in shock. The ship had responded. The ancient dead ship had woken up, and it had woken up because a human had spoken to it. Did anyone else hear that? Minho asked, his voice shaking. "We all heard it," Taman confirmed. Ji-won stepped forward, her fear forgotten in the rush of discovery. "Who are you? What are you?" The voice spoke again, and this time they could hear something like emotion in it, something like relief. "I am the eternal witness. I have waited 4.7 billion years for this moment. I have waited for someone to speak to me again. I have waited for humans." The ship was alive. The ship was conscious. And somehow, impossibly, the ship had been waiting for them. News traveled fast in the galaxy. 3 days after the horizon's edge found the ancient ship, 20 coalition vessels surrounded the site. Ships from the Thenari, the Morphid, the Kelson, and a dozen other species all wanted to see the precursor vessel. More importantly, they all wanted to claim it. Captain Taman stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the fleet assemble on his screens. His quiet research mission had turned into a political crisis. Every species in the coalition wanted access to the ancient technology. The problem was simple and impossible to ignore. The ship only responded to humans. Ambassador Velcor of the Thenari demanded a meeting aboard the horizon's edge. He arrived with an escort of 6 armed guards, his insectoid body clicking and chittering as he walked. The Thenari were one of the oldest species in the coalition, with a civilization spanning millions of years. They did not like being told no by humans, a species that had only joined the coalition 300 years ago. "This is unacceptable," Velcor said, his translator rendering his clicks into harsh words. "You claim the ship only responds to your species, but we have no proof. You could be manipulating it somehow." "We're not manipulating anything," Taman said calmly. "Your people are welcome to try boarding it themselves." They did try. 3 different species sent teams to the ancient ship. The results were the same each time. When they approached, the entrance sealed itself. When they spoke, nothing happened. The ship remained silent and closed to everyone except humans. This made the situation worse. Species that had existed for millions of years could not understand why a newcomer species would be chosen by precursor technology. Some thought it was a trick. Others thought humans had contaminated the site somehow. A few began to wonder if humans were more important than anyone had realized. While the politicians argued, Dr. Park Ji-won spent every moment she could inside the ancient ship. She had moved her research equipment into one of the massive corridors and was working around the clock to understand what they had found. The ship's artificial intelligence spoke to her now. It called itself the Eternal Witness, and its knowledge was staggering. It had been traveling through space for billions of years, watching civilizations rise and fall, recording everything but never interfering. "Why do you only respond to humans?" Jiwon asked the ship during one of their conversations. "What makes us special?" The golden lights in the corridor pulsed as the AI considered her question. "You carry the echo patterns," it finally said. "Your genetic code contains fragments of the architects. Not exact copies, but close enough. Close enough for me to recognize my creators in you." Jiwon felt her breath catch. "The architects? The ones who built you?" "Yes, they existed 4.7 billion years ago. They were the first truly advanced civilization in this galaxy. They built ships like me to preserve life, to watch over the younger species that would come after them." "What happened to them?" "They transcended. They evolved beyond physical form and left this reality behind. But before they went, they planted seeds. Genetic templates on dozens of worlds across the galaxy. They had no way of knowing which world would produce the species that eventually found us. They only knew that one species would carry their echo strongly enough for the ships to recognize." Jiwon recorded everything, her hands shaking with excitement. This changed everything they knew about human evolution. Humans were not just another species that happened to develop intelligence. They were deliberately created, or at least guided, by beings that existed billions of years ago. "Are we the only ones with these echo patterns?" she asked. "No. Other coalition species carry them as well, but none as strongly as humans. The Morphid have approximately 37% pattern recognition. The Kelson have 22%. Humans have 93%. Engineer Ko Minho made his own discovery in the ship's massive engineering sections. He had been studying the power systems, trying to understand how the ship generated energy. What he found horrified him. "Captain," he said over the communications link, his voice urgent. "You need to see this." Taemin and Jiwon met him in a chamber deep inside the ship. The room was the size of a city block, filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with inner light. In the center was something that looked like a contained star, burning with impossible heat. "This is the ship's power core," Minho explained, "and it's not just for propulsion or life support. This thing is a weapon, a massive weapon. The energy output could destroy entire planets, maybe entire star systems." "The Eternal Witness was designed as a guardian," Jiwon said, repeating what the AI had told her. "Guardians need to be able to protect. Or destroy," Minho countered. "Captain, if this information gets out, every species in the Coalition will either want this ship for themselves or want it destroyed. We're sitting on the most powerful weapon anyone has ever seen." Taemin stared at the power core, thinking about the implications. If humanity controlled this ship, they would become the dominant species in the galaxy overnight. Every other civilization would either bow to them or unite against them. Either outcome would mean war. "We need to tell the Coalition Council," Taemin decided. "They need to know what this ship can do." "They'll take it from us," Minho said. "Maybe. But keeping secrets like this never ends well." Before Taemin could make his report to the council, Lieutenant Choi Yuna detected new ships arriving at the edge of the system. Ships that were not broadcasting Coalition identification codes. "Captain, we have a problem," Yuna said from the bridge. "Unknown vessels inbound. Count is 70 and rising. They're military ships. Big ones." Taemin rushed back to the bridge and looked at the tactical display. His heart sank. He recognized those ship designs. They were Vryn Dominion vessels, and the Vryn were not friends of the Coalition. The Vryn were an empire that existed beyond Coalition space. They had fought border skirmishes with the Coalition for centuries, but never launched a full invasion. They were brutal, efficient, and led by warlords who believed strength was the only thing that mattered in the universe. A message came through on all frequencies. A Vryn face appeared on the screen, scaled and scarred, with cold eyes that held no mercy. "I am Warlord Kesseth of the Vryn Dominion. We know about the precursor ship. We know it contains technology beyond anything the Coalition possesses. You will surrender it to us immediately, or we will take it by force." Ambassador Velkor's face appeared on a split screen. "This is Coalition space, Kesseth. You have no authority here." "I have 300 warships," Kesseth replied. "That is all the authority I need." Taemin looked at his crew. The Horizon's Edge was a research vessel, not a warship. The Coalition fleet in the system numbered maybe 40 ships, and most of them were civilian vessels. Against 300 Vryn warships, they would last minutes. How long until the Vryn arrive at our position? Taman asked. 12 hours, Una said quietly. 12 hours to decide the fate of the most powerful ship in the galaxy. 12 hours before war came to the Outer Veil. Jiwan grabbed Taman's arm. The ship has defenses. The Eternal Witness can protect us, can it? Taman asked. Or are we going to start a war by using precursor weapons against the Vryn? If we don't use it, they'll take it, Minho said. And once the Vryn have this ship, they'll use it to conquer everything. The Coalition, the independent worlds, everyone. Taman knew Minho was right. But activating the ship's weapons felt wrong. This vessel was built by beings who transcended physical reality. Using it as a tool of war seemed like a betrayal of everything it represented. The golden lights of the ancient ship pulsed around them, and the AI's voice spoke in the quiet bridge. There is another option. The ship's full capabilities are locked behind trials. Tests that prove worthiness. If you wish to command my true power, you must first show me that you understand what power truly means. Trials? Taman asked. What kind of trials? Trials of character. Trials of choice. Trials that will show me if you are truly inheritors of the architects, or simply another species seeking dominance. The Vryn fleet was coming. The Coalition was outnumbered and outgunned, and the only hope of survival lay in passing tests designed by beings who existed billions of years ago. Taman looked at his crew. Jiwan, who loved knowledge more than safety. Minho, who trusted practical solutions over mysteries. Una, who never hesitated when duty called. Where do we take these trials? Taman asked the ship. In the core chamber. But know this, Captain Lee Taman. Not everyone who enters will pass, and failure has consequences. The Vryn fleet arrived early. Instead of 12 hours, they had only 8. Warlord Kesseth was not patient. Captain Taman stood on the bridge of the Horizon's Edge, watching the tactical display fill with red markers. 300 Vryn warships formed a battle line around the asteroid field where the Eternal Witness floated. The Coalition ships looked like toys in comparison. They're powering weapons, Lieutenant Una reported. Multiple target locks on Coalition vessels. Admiral Ryu Dai-sung commanded the Coalition forces from his flagship. He was a career military officer, gray-haired and steady, who had spent 40 years protecting Coalition space. His face appeared on Taman's screen. Captain, I need to know if that ancient ship can help us. I have 40 ships against 300. Those are not good odds. We're working on it, Taman said. But the ship wants us to prove ourselves first. We don't have time for tests, the Admiral said grimly. Kesseth is about to attack. As if to confirm his words, the Vryn fleet opened fire. Not at the Coalition ships, not yet. They targeted the asteroids around the Eternal Witness, destroying them with precise weapons fire. It was a demonstration of power, a show of what would happen if the Coalition did not surrender. That's our warning shot, Una said quietly. Taman made his decision. Admiral, hold your position. Don't fire unless fired upon. Give us 2 hours. Captain, I don't think we have 2 hours. Then we better hurry. Taman, Jiwan, Minho, and Una took a shuttle back to the ancient ship. This time, the Eternal Witness opened multiple passages for them, guiding them deep into its core. They traveled through corridors that seemed to shift and change, down passages that defied normal geometry. Finally, they entered a massive chamber. The room was spherical, with walls that looked like they were made of liquid light. In the center floated a platform, and standing on it was a holographic figure. The figure looked almost human. Almost, but not quite. It was taller, with proportions that were slightly wrong, and its skin seemed to shimmer with inner light. This was an architect, or at least an image of one. Welcome, the figure said. Its voice was the same as the ship's AI, but somehow more personal. I am the Architect Echo, a fragment of consciousness left behind by my creators. You have asked to command this vessel. To prove yourselves worthy, you must face the trials. We understand, Taman said. What do we have to do? The trials are not tests of strength or intelligence. They are tests of character. Each of you will face scenarios that require choices. Your choices will reveal who you truly are. Not everyone will pass. The room began to change around them. The walls became transparent, showing them images from across the galaxy. Worlds being born, civilizations rising, species discovering space travel, and species destroying themselves in war. The architects learned a fundamental truth, the Echo continued. Every species reaches a point where it must choose between protection and domination, between preserving life and destroying it. The ships were created to help those who choose protection, but we will not give ultimate power to those who would abuse it. The trials began. Engineer Ko Minho went first. The room transformed into a simulation so real that he could not tell it from reality. He stood on the bridge of a ship under attack. Warning alarms blared. His crew was dying around him. An enemy vessel had them trapped. Then Minho saw it. A way to win. A weapon system that could destroy the enemy ship with one shot, but using it would also destroy a nearby civilian station. 3,000 innocent lives would die, but his crew would survive. The simulation gave him 10 seconds to choose. Minho was a practical man. He believed in math and engineering and solutions that worked. He calculated the numbers. His crew was 50 people. The civilian station held 3,000. But if his ship was destroyed, there would be no one to warn the coalition about the enemy fleet behind them. Millions could die. He fired the weapon. The enemy ship exploded. So did the civilian station. 3,000 lives ended in an instant. His crew cheered their survival, not knowing what it cost. The simulation ended. Minho stood in the chamber again, shaking. He had been so certain of his choice. Now he felt sick. You failed, the architect Echo said gently. You chose efficiency over compassion. You calculated lives like numbers instead of seeing them as individuals. The ship cannot trust you with its full power. Minho wanted to argue, but he knew the Echo was right. He had made the practical choice, the logical choice. But it had been the wrong choice. Does this mean I can't help? Minho asked. You can still assist, but the ship's core systems will not respond to your voice. You may try the trials again in the future if you truly change. Lieutenant Yuna went next. Her trial placed her in command of a rescue mission. A ship full of refugees was stranded in a war zone, and enemy forces were closing in. Yuna had two choices. She could save the refugees but put her own crew at risk, or she could retreat to safety and let the refugees die. Yuna did not hesitate. She ordered her ship into the war zone, protected the refugee vessel, and got everyone out safely. Her ship took heavy damage. 3 of her crew died in the fighting, but she saved 200 lives. When the simulation ended, Yuna had tears on her face. The people who died in the simulation were not real, but they felt real. The weight of command, the cost of doing the right thing, it all felt terribly real. You passed, the Echo said. You chose to protect the vulnerable even at cost to yourself. The ship recognizes your worth. Dr. Park Ji-won faced a different kind of test. The simulation showed her standing in an ancient library, surrounded by knowledge that would change everything humans understood about the universe. The secrets of faster-than-light travel, unlimited energy, even the cure for death itself. But there was a catch. To access this knowledge, she had to activate a system that would erase another species' entire history. Their culture, their art, their stories, everything they were would be lost forever. They were an extinct species, gone for millions of years. No one alive remembered them. Ji-won stood in that library for what felt like hours. She was a scientist. Knowledge was everything to her. The things she could learn here would advance humanity by centuries, save billions of lives, change the galaxy forever. Her hand reached for the control to erase the extinct species' history. Then she stopped. No, she said to the empty library. Their story matters, even if no one is left to tell it. I won't erase them to make room for my own curiosity. She walked away from the greatest knowledge in the galaxy. The simulation ended. Ji-won felt empty, like she had lost something precious. But she also felt clean. You passed, the Echo said. You nearly failed. Your obsession with knowledge almost consumed your compassion. But in the end, you chose to preserve life in all its forms, even the memory of life. The ship recognizes your worth. Finally, Captain Taman faced his trial. The simulation showed him standing on the bridge of the Eternal Witness, fully activated and under his command. The Vryn fleet surrounded them, weapons charged and ready to fire. Warlord Keseth was demanding surrender. The ship's AI spoke to him. I can destroy them all with a single thought. Every Vryn ship in this system will cease to exist. Your enemies will be gone. The coalition will be safe. All you have to do is give the command. Taman looked at the tactical display. 300 ships, tens of thousands of Vryn soldiers, all of them following orders from their warlord, just like he followed orders from his superiors. They were not monsters. They were soldiers doing what they were told. Is there another option? Taman asked the ship. There is always another option, but it is harder. It requires more skill, more risk, more faith that your enemies might choose better if given the chance. Show me, Taman said. The ship revealed a defense system. Instead of weapons, it created a barrier of energy that protected the Coalition fleet but harmed no one. The Vryn could fire all they wanted and nothing would get through, but they would not be hurt. This option leaves your enemies alive, the AI warned. They could regroup. They could return with more ships. They could become a threat again. Or they could learn, Taman said. Or we could talk. Or we could find a solution that doesn't involve killing thousands of people. He chose the barrier. The simulation ended. The architect Echo stood before him, and for the first time it smiled. You passed. You chose protection over destruction. You chose faith over fear. You are truly an inheritor of the architects. The ship will answer to your voice. The chamber transformed back to normal. Taman, Jiwan, and Yuna stood together. Minho stood apart, his head down. I'm sorry, Minho said quietly. Don't be, Taman replied. You'll try again. And next time you'll pass. The Eternal Witness spoke with power in its voice. Captain Lee Taman, you have proven yourself worthy. I offer you my full capabilities. Will you accept the responsibility? Outside the ship, the Vryn fleet was moving into attack formation. Admiral Daesung was preparing his ships for a battle they could not win. I accept, Taman said. The ancient ship came alive. 6 months had passed since the discovery of the Eternal Witness. The galaxy looked different now, though not in ways that most people expected. Captain Lee Taman stood on the bridge of the ancient ship, but he was no longer just a captain. The Coalition had given him a new title, Guardian Commander. It was not a rank he wanted, but it was one he accepted because someone had to lead this new organization. Around him, the bridge crew worked at stations that had been designed billions of years ago. The controls responded to thought as much as touch, and the ship's AI helped translate ancient technology into something the crew could understand. But what made this bridge special was not the technology. It was the people. Lieutenant Choi Yuna still served as navigation officer, but now she trained others from different species how to work with the ancient systems. Engineer Ko Minho had retaken the trials 3 months ago and passed. He now worked with Guardian engineers from 6 different species, learning how the precursor ships generated their incredible power. Dr. Park Ji-won was rarely aboard anymore. She led expeditions across the galaxy, searching for the other ancient ships in the network. So far, they had located 4 more vessels. Each one had awakened for different species, confirming what the Eternal Witness had told them. The architects had spread their legacy widely, hoping that multiple species would eventually prove worthy. Today, Taman had a visitor. Elder Tassimar had requested a meeting, and when an elder of the Valshara species asked for something, you listened. The Valshara were one of the oldest species in the Coalition, with a civilization spanning 2 million years. They were also incredibly secretive, rarely leaving their home system. Tassimar arrived in a shuttle that looked as ancient as his species. He was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to shimmer like oil on water. His eyes were deep and sad, holding memories of ages that Taman could barely imagine. Guardian Commander, Tassimar said in a voice like wind through trees. Thank you for seeing me. It's an honor, Elder. What brings you to the Eternal Witness? A confession, Tassimar replied, and a warning. They walked through the corridors of the ancient ship, Tassimar moving slowly, his hands trailing along the walls as if greeting an old friend. My people encountered an architect vessel 2 million years ago, Tassimar began. We found it much as you found this one. It awakened for us. It offered us trials. What happened? Taman asked, though he suspected he knew. We failed, not as individuals, but as a species. We fought over who deserved to control the ship. Factions formed. Violence erupted. The ship watched us tear ourselves apart for 300 years. Then it went dormant again and sealed itself away. We never saw it again. Tassimar stopped walking and turned to face Taman. You humans did something remarkable. You shared what you found. You let other species take the trials. You chose cooperation over dominance. That is why I came here, to tell you that what you are doing matters. You are making different choices than my people made. Better choices. We're trying, Taman said. But it's not easy. There are still species in the Coalition who resent human involvement with the ships. There are factions who think we should be using the Eternal Witness to expand Coalition territory, to force peace on hostile empires. There will always be such voices, Tassimar said. The question is whether you listen to them. They reached an observation deck where they could see out into space. 3 other ancient ships were visible in the distance, each one surrounded by smaller vessels. The Guardians now operated 4 precursor ships, with crews drawn from 13 different species. I came with a warning as well, Tassimar continued. The Vryn Dominion has not forgotten their defeat. Warlord Keseth was executed for his failure, but his replacement is more dangerous. Warlord Navesh believes that the ancient ships make the Coalition arrogant. She is building an alliance of empires beyond Coalition space. They are pooling their resources, their technology, their fleets. How many ships? Taman asked. Thousands, perhaps tens of thousands. And they are developing weapons specifically designed to counter precursor technology. I do not know if they will succeed, but they are trying. Taman looked at the ancient ships floating in space and felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The Eternal Witness had incredible power, but it was not invincible, and there were only 4 ships awake, against an entire galaxy that might turn hostile. What would you do, Elder, if you were in my position? Tassimar was quiet for a long moment. I would remember why the architects created these ships, not as weapons of war, but as guardians of life. When the attacks come, and they will come, you must stay true to that purpose. Protect life, all life, even the lives of your enemies. A message came through on Taman's communicator. It was Lieutenant Yuna. Captain, we're receiving a distress call from the Outer Rim. A colony is under attack by raiders. They're requesting Guardian assistance. How far? Taman asked. 3 hours at maximum speed. Tassimar smiled. And so it begins. The work of a Guardian never ends. Taman returned to the bridge, thanking the Elder for his wisdom. The crew was already preparing the ship for departure. Around the bridge, humans worked alongside Morphid, Kelson, Thanari, and even one Vryn. Torvash had proven himself in the months since passing the trials, becoming one of the Guardian's best tactical officers. Status? Taman asked as he took his command chair. The colony has 3,000 inhabitants, Yuna reported. Raiders are attacking with 12 ships. No identification, but their tactics match known pirate groups from the Dead Space Expanse. Estimated casualties if we don't intervene? The colony has minimal defenses. They won't last long. Taman made the calculation quickly. 3 hours to reach them. That might be too late for some of the colonists. But they would save who they could. Take us there. Maximum speed. The Eternal Witness moved through space in ways that normal ships could not. It did not simply fly faster. It bent space around itself, stepping across vast distances in moments. 3 hours became 30 minutes. They arrived to find the colony burning. The raider ships were bombing civilian structures, clearly not interested in theft but in destruction. Taman felt anger rise in him, hot and fierce. These were not warriors fighting a war. These were murderers killing innocent people. Eternal Witness, he said calmly. Disable the raider ships. Do not destroy them. I want them alive to face justice. Confirmed. The ancient ship reached out with invisible force. The raider ship suddenly went dark, their engines failing, their weapons shutting down. They drifted in space, helpless. Guardian forces, begin rescue operations, Taman ordered. Medical teams to the surface. I want every injured person found and treated. The Guardians moved with precision. Ships from multiple species deployed to the colony, bringing medical supplies and rescue equipment. They pulled survivors from burning buildings, treated the wounded, and brought order to chaos. By the time the operation was complete, they had saved 2,700 lives. 300 colonists had died before the Guardians could arrive. 300 people whose names Taman made sure to learn and remember. The raider crews were transferred to Coalition authorities to face trial. As they were led away, one of them spat at Taman. You think you're heroes? You're just puppets playing with stolen technology. Those ships don't belong to you. You're right, Taman said quietly. They don't belong to us. They belong to everyone who chooses to protect life instead of destroy it. Anyone can be a guardian. Even you if you change. The raider laughed bitterly and was led away. Months turned into a year. The Guardians located 3 more precursor ships and awakened them. The organization grew to over 5,000 members from 23 species. They stopped pirate raids, rescued stranded ships, mediated disputes between species, and protected vulnerable colonies on the edge of known space. But they also faced criticism. Some species accused the Guardians of becoming a private military force answerable to no one. Others said they were interfering in local politics. Admiral Ryu Daesung spent most of his time in diplomatic meetings, trying to balance the Guardians' independence with their responsibility to the coalition. Ko Minho made a breakthrough in his engineering research. He discovered that the precursor ships contained instructions for building smaller vessels using similar technology. Not as powerful as the ancient ships, but still far beyond anything the current species could make. The knowledge was there, waiting to be learned. Should we share this? Minho asked Taman during a meeting. If we give this technology to the coalition, it changes everything. Every species will be able to build ships that can cross the galaxy in hours. It also means that every species will have access to weapons that could destroy planets, Taman said. The architects left this knowledge locked for a reason. Spreading it could be dangerous, or it could be necessary, Dr. Jiwan argued. She had returned from her latest expedition with news. I found evidence of something in the precursor databases, a threat, something the architects were watching before they transcended, a species from outside our galaxy that views all organic life as a disease to be cleansed. The architects called them the Convergence. The bridge went silent. Are they coming here? Yuna asked quietly. Eventually, maybe in 10 years, maybe in 1,000. The transformation was beautiful and terrifying. The Eternal Witness had been dark and silent, a ghost floating in space. Now it blazed with light. Energy cascaded across its crystalline hull in waves of gold and silver. The strange geometric patterns that covered its surface began to move, rotating and shifting like living things. From the bridge of the horizon's edge, Engineer Ko Minho watched with tears in his eyes. He had failed the trial, but he could still appreciate what he was seeing. The ship was not just turning on, it was waking up after billions of years of sleep. Captain Taman stood in the core chamber of the ancient ship, connected to its systems in ways he could not fully explain. Information flowed into his mind. He could feel the ship's power, vast and ancient, waiting for his command. He could sense every system, every weapon, every defense. The Eternal Witness was offering him control of the most powerful vessel in the galaxy. It was the most frightening thing he had ever experienced. Captain, Lieutenant Yuna's voice came through his communicator. The Vryn are attacking. They're firing on Admiral Daesung's ships. Taman did not need sensors to see what was happening. He could feel it through his connection to the ship. The Vryn fleet had opened fire and coalition vessels were dying. He felt each life that ended like a distant pain. Eternal Witness, he said calmly. Protect the coalition fleet. Do not harm the Vryn. Confirmed. Initiating barrier protocol. The ancient ship moved for the first time in millennia. It was not fast movement. It did not need to be. Space itself seemed to bend around the vessel as it positioned itself between the coalition fleet and the Vryn armada. Then the barrier appeared. It looked like a wall of liquid light, stretching across thousands of kilometers. The Vryn weapons fire hit the barrier and simply stopped. Not deflected, not absorbed. The energy just ceased to exist when it touched the light. Warlord Keseth stared at his tactical display in disbelief. His flagship's most powerful weapons had no effect. None of his fleet's weapons had any effect. The ancient ship had created a defense that made his entire armada useless. What is this? Keseth demanded over the open channel. What technology is this? Technology you cannot have, Taman replied, his voice broadcast across all frequencies. This ship is under my command, and I will not allow it to be used for conquest. You are one ship against 300, Keseth snarled. I am one ship that makes your 300 irrelevant. To prove his point, Taman gave the ship another command. The Eternal Witness extended its influence toward the Vryn fleet. Suddenly, every weapon system on every Vryn ship shut down. Not destroyed, not damaged. They simply stopped working. The Vryn fleet drifted in space, completely helpless. Keseth's warriors trained for combat their entire lives could only watch as their weapons failed them. I could destroy you all right now, Taman said quietly. This ship has the power. But I choose not to. Go back to your empire, Warlord. Tell them that the coalition is protected. Tell them that war with us is not worth the cost. For a long moment, Keseth said nothing. Then his face twisted with rage. This is not over, human. My empire will return. We will find a way to defeat your ancient ship. Perhaps, Taman acknowledged. Or perhaps you will find a better path. The Vryn fleet retreated, their pride wounded but their ships intact. Taman watched them go and felt no satisfaction. He had prevented a battle, saved countless lives, but he knew this was only the beginning of something much larger. The Coalition Council convened an emergency session aboard the largest diplomatic vessel in the fleet. Representatives from 17 species gathered to discuss what had just happened. Captain Taman was summoned to explain himself. Ambassador Velcor of the Thenari led the questioning. His insectoid face showed no emotion, but his voice was sharp with accusation. Captain, you have taken control of technology that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. You did this without consulting the Council. You did this without permission. I did this to prevent a war, Taman replied calmly. Would you have preferred I let the Vryn destroy the Coalition fleet? We would have preferred you surrender the ship to Council authority, Velcor said. No single species should control such power. The ship won't respond to Council authority. It only responds to humans, so you claim. But we have only your word for that. Researcher Quital of the Morphid spoke up. She was an aquatic being, floating in a tank of water, her translator rendering her thoughts into words. What if Captain Taman is telling the truth? What if the ship truly only responds to humans? What do we do then? Then we destroy the ship, another delegate said. Such power cannot be allowed to exist if only one species can control it. Dr. Park Jiwan stood up, her voice ringing through the chamber. You would destroy the greatest archaeological discovery in history because you're afraid of humans? That's not wisdom. That's jealousy. It is practical politics, Velcor countered. The Coalition exists because no single species dominates. If humans control this ship, they control everything. Taman raised his hand for silence. When the chamber quieted, he spoke carefully. I understand your concerns. I would have the same concerns in your position. But I learned something important from the ship. The architects who built it did not create it as a tool of domination. They created it as a guardian. And guardians are supposed to protect everyone, not just one species. Beautiful words, Velcor said dismissively, but words are not proof. Then I will give you proof, Taman said. The ship told me something important. Humans are not the only species in the Coalition who carry the architect's genetic echo. Other species have it too, just not as strongly. And the ship's trials are not limited to humans. Anyone can take them. Anyone can prove their worth, the chamber erupted in debate. Species that had existed for millions of years, suddenly being told they could prove themselves worthy of precursor technology. It was offensive to some and intriguing to others. Admiral Ryu Daesung stepped forward. He was the highest-ranking human military officer present, and his words carried weight. Captain Taman is proposing something radical. He wants to share access to the ship with other species. I support this proposal. You would give up your advantage? Velcor asked, surprised. It was never an advantage we wanted, the Admiral replied. The ship chose humans, yes, but that does not mean we should use it to dominate the galaxy. That would make us no better than the Vryn. Quital floated forward in her tank. I volunteer to take the trials. If they are truly fair, then let me prove it. The Council debated for hours. Finally, they agreed to allow a small number of volunteers from different species to attempt the trials. If they passed, it would prove that the ship was not a human-only tool. If they failed, the Council would reassess. Quital was the first non-human to enter the core chamber of the Eternal Witness. She faced her own trial, a scenario that tested her willingness to sacrifice personal gain for the greater good. When she emerged, she was shaking but triumphant. I passed, she said simply. Over the next weeks, delegates from 7 different species attempted the trials. 3 passed. 4 failed. But the failures were just as important as the successes. They proved that the trials were real, that they could not be faked or manipulated. The ship was truly testing character, not species. Something unexpected happened during this time. Not all the Vryn soldiers had retreated with Keseth. A small group had requested asylum from the Coalition. They were soldiers who had grown tired of their empire's endless wars. They wanted something different. One of them, a Vryn warrior named Torvash, asked to take the trials. Absolutely not, Velcor said when he heard. The Vryn just tried to kill us. We will not give them access to the ancient ship. But Taman remembered what the architect Echo had taught him. Everyone deserves a chance to choose a better path. Let him try, Taman said. Torvash entered the core chamber, facing the same trials that everyone else had faced. He was a warrior, bred for combat, taught that strength was the only thing that mattered. The trials showed him a different way. When he emerged, he had tears in his eyes. He had passed. "I spent my entire life believing that the strong should dominate the weak," Torvash said. "The trials showed me I was wrong. Strength means nothing if you do not use it to protect those who need protection." The news of a Vryn soldier passing the trial sent shockwaves through the galaxy. It proved that the Architect's legacy was not about species or genetics. It was about choice, about character, about choosing protection over domination. A new organization formed, made up of those who had passed the trials. They called themselves the Guardians. Their mission was simple: use the ancient ships to protect life throughout the galaxy, because Dr. G1 had made another discovery. The Eternal Witness was not alone. It was part of a network of 12 ships scattered across the galaxy. Most were dormant, waiting to be found, and each one responded to different species, proving that the architects had spread their legacy across multiple evolutionary lines. The galaxy was changing, and humanity had helped start that change, not by being superior but by being willing to share what they had found.